company and tax and private client practitioner, joins us to bring a common sense approach to money in a world of total insanity. Let's welcome Tony D'Angelo.
All right, every Tuesday we sit down with Tony D'Angelo. You can follow him on Twitter, Tony D'Angelo7, and it's a great follow. I've been doing radio since I was 25 years old, 26 years old. First time I cracked the mic, it was an overnight shift at a top 40 radio station. And in all that time, I've done a lot of different things. I've done, all kinds of crazy stuff on the air. I've run one of those wild zoo morning shows and then sort of morphed into this 17-year run on talk radio, which I am eternally grateful to all of the great listeners out there for being a part of. And it's great getting a chance to talk to different people and cobble together just a great set of guests that come through every single week. And we're at the pinnacle that we've ever been. This is the greatest set of guests we've ever had. And in all that time, I've done different things, put together different things and played different funny bits, etc. I think, though, in all of those years, I've never got as many requests as I've gotten for Tony D'Angelo's Christmas message, which came about in the last, 72 hours. But, Tony, wow, you're knocking them dead with that Christmas message.
It's making me consider another line of work. Well, good morning, Lee Elci. Good morning, everybody. Proud to be among you. I can't take credit for the poem. That's a BBC poem, but I added a couple of changes and inflections in the music, and we live in such a, whatever you want to call it, some days a sour, sick, and crazy world, and the only thing many times, there are two things that will keep you sane are prayer and laughter, and if it makes you laugh, I'm happy to do it, and I'm glad it's made so many people happy.
Well, I got a lot of requests for it. I just pass it along to you, so you can forward it. You can forward all the information and the audio. So
I'll see if the inspiration strikes me anywhere more between now and the end of the holiday season.
Sounds good.
But, as far as departures from what we usually do, I get it. This is an amazing thing. We're talking about this. I get an incredible amount of, requests and things to look at. And, hey, Tony, look at this and look at that. And, cloning would be a wonderful thing if it were invented. I'm still working. It's still me, and this is not my full-time job. Believe me, it's a job I enjoy many times a lot more than my full-time job. But I got one last week from one of our dear lady listeners, and she politely chastised me, and I appreciate it. It said, you started this years ago, D'Angelo, and you were supposed to give us some financial information and, kind of tongue-in-cheek. And this is something I ran into, and would you kindly talk about it? And, we got off into the whole thing of Ned and COVID and fraud and incompetence and, the never-ending, shall we say, parade of incompetence and crookedness and everything else. But I listened to or I read what she said, and it's a very interesting point, and this is something that a lot of people are going to run into. So it's sort of me doing a public service financial segment, if you will, and this is about inheriting individual retirement accounts. And this is not a rich man's problem. Mom dies, grandpa dies, brother dies. They put a couple of $1,000s in an IRA, and they either forgot about it, or they contributed, or they were diligent in doing it, and they didn't live to take down the whole thing. And brother or kid or something, gets a pile of money, and they think, wow, terrific. They're grieving over the passing, but, the money would help. The first thing I want to say to everybody is that if you find yourself in this situation, please, please, please do not run out and spend the money. Don't spend all the money. Be very cautious, because I tell people all the time, this is not money. It is income, and you have to pay tax on income, more than likely. There's a whole lot of other classifications that we really can't get into in this segment, based on time. And there's a whole lot of other minefields. Depending on when the person died, there's one set of rules, 2019, 2020, and then last night in Congress, they're looking to change the rules again. So you've got to be very, very careful in what you do. And the other thing is, if you don't take it out when you're supposed to take it out, you can be penalized as much as 50% a year. Now, I could blow this off, and I could say, seek competent and dedicated professional advice. Well, a lot of the advice you're going to find is not competent nor dedicated nor professional. This is something out there in the field which is called wrong half the time by those claiming to be experts. So the only thing I want to say is that if you run into something like this, the first thing you do is, first of all, good for you, pause. Do your research. Seek a couple of opinions. And if you get a couple of opinions telling you the right thing, okay, that's good. But if you want to, come to me and say, hey, does this sound right? I'm more than happy to do that. I cannot take your business. That's not what I'm here to do. But, as a public service, I want to make sure you go to the right place and you don't get hurt with stupid stuff. So I just wanted to say that. Yeah. Thank you to the young lady who told me that I should, because this is a common situation.
So you can lose half of your
oh, heck yeah.
Really?
If you don't take it out when you're supposed to. Because Congress had a thing that said, we're going to let you put this money aside, but it needs to come out when we say it needs to come out, and not put it into tax exemption land forever. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. The government giveth and the government taketh, what you were saying this morning.
All right, that's interesting. So make sure you hire or find somebody competent that can guide you through that.
And get several opinions.
Yeah.
Don't take the first one.
Right.
Because the first one, he may have a motivation for wanting to get his hands on all that money.
Okay.
I hate to, I hate to say that, but if I didn't say that, I'd be remiss.
Right.
You walk into a minefield in so many things. Financial services is probably one of the biggest minefields in,
okay.
maybe like a half step down from politics.
All right, Tony D'Angelo, some words of wisdom there. Switch gears for me. Give me your opinion on Brittney. Yeah.
The Brittney Griner thing, and I've heard, I've listened. I agree with just about everybody who's come on this show as to the priorities of the people in government and, the wretched way they go about things and what they value as opposed to what they do not value. And yet, I'm an old guy, and I have my memory. And several questions that I don't think have been asked. Ronnie Rando asked a wonderful question yesterday that we're going to talk about. God bless him. It was absolutely what we're going to be talking about today. But the first thing is, why do the woke weenies of the world not only want to make their mindset my mindset in the United States of America, but they want to take it abroad, and that's the way it should be over there. And, it's like Tuffy the Mouse on Russia if they don't agree with me because this is the way it is. That's the first thing. And then there's, why does an American athlete not honor the country from which they've come and his or her behavior? We'll get to that in a moment. But what Ronnie said, and really what I'd like to talk about this morning is, and this is just the indicia of society as we have gone, why don't we say those three magic words anymore when something like this happened? I screwed up. The accountability for the screw up. And it's that, was it her? Was it Brittney? Was it the league? It's like, no, they're completely blameless. Somebody screwed up here big. And, we don't accept that anymore. We don't point the finger at, I'm not saying to accuse, but just to say, accept the responsibility. It's always this spin and this thing of, well, this is the way it is, and, what's wrong with you if you don't agree? I sort of check my mental, whatever you want to call it, my mental recollection going back. Do you remember, this was back when Billy Martin was managing the Yankees, and his daughter Kellyanne was caught in Colombia smuggling cocaine. She had 2 packages of cocaine. They were strapped or they were duct taped to her thighs and her thighs. And she was detained. Of course, if you're in America, if you're an American there, especially somebody like that who is of high visibility, there used to be this thing of, I am of high visibility, I must be on my best behavior. They will fry you in a prison forever, and it took everybody in baseball and all of George's money to get her out. It wasn't this thing of, oh, she's a political prisoner. Oh, you're assaulting the children of New York Yankees. No, it used to be, I screwed up. I take my lumps. Now, what can we do to fix this? Now, there's also precedent. I know you remember this. Remember when Dave Winfield was warming up in the outfield for the Yankees and he killed the seagull in Toronto?
I do.
Yeah, and he was detained, and it was because the seagull is like the equivalent, at least then, of the eagle. Yeah, you could argue that all you want, but that's the way it was. It wasn't this thing of, you're detaining an athlete of color. It was, no, I screwed up. What can I do to fix this? And I just get so tired of this thing of people who want to justify bad behavior. And, I mean, it's just indicative of the society. And the other thing is that if you go way back, go back to Francis Gary Powers and the U2 incident. Now, of course, this was a different America, but he was detained for 2 years. He came back into America, and people were going up to him and said, why didn't you take the poison pill? Why were you there to let them interrogate you for 2 years? I mean, we're just so wimpy as a country. It just gets me very angry.
I've said this, I've told the story before. When I was in Australia, I was detained for almost 6 hours by customs. They went through everything that I had. I had nothing. But, I mean, they went through everything again, had 2-3 different people come and talk to me because I was going over there to play baseball. And, I don't know, they just didn't buy the story. Eventually they let me go. But, yeah, I mean, you've got to be a complete moron to go someplace and buck their system, in particular when it comes to drugs. I mean, you go to a place like Singapore or something like that, do the same thing. They either kill you or they cut your hands off. I mean, there's just no – you make a great point. If you're someplace else, you've got to live by their rules.
When in Rome, that's what my parents always told me. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Simple as that and just as difficult.
100%. Totally agree. And I think you're right.
It's just amazing to me. And we've got to listen to all this stuff. And it's like – anyway, but I just had to say that. Thank you, Ronnie. You were 100% right on with that.
So let me ask you, I ask the same question to everybody. She's playing in her first WNBA game. Music is fired up. Getting ready to play the national anthem. Does she take a knee? She put her hand over her heart.
She takes a knee.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that.
Yeah, I think it's basically, because I think she sees it as,
she was owed.
My country didn't honor my values.
I agree.
And really it was your country's values that got you over there in the first place.
I totally agree with that.
That's my DraftKings prediction.
All right, what's new with Ned?
What's new with Ned? We talked about Ned. We talked about Ned at the state dinner with, the rumpled clothes and high water Harry and all that kind of thing. And I still seethe about this. I do not see, other than what happens here, not one other media outlet or political figure criticizing Ned for how he looked. And now it's to the point, I think, that if you're silent about it, if you think this is okay, if you think that, this is the production that you want to see Connecticut have on the national stage, come before me and defend that and say it's okay, because your silence is not acceptable, media or political figure. But if you won't condemn it, you have to defend it at this point. But almost on cue last week, when we finished up, the word came down from the government that Sikorsky had lost the helicopter contract to Bell Textron in Texas. They went in favor of the V-280 Bauer tiltrotor as opposed to the Sikorsky helicopter. Now, one can only wonder, and actually I think when you look at Ned and you look at his appearance, I think it's more of a punctuation than a sentence. If somebody walking by is like, well, we're not going to give those people that. Look at him, for crying out loud. But I think that's more punctuation than, in fairness to Ned, because I do try to be fair. Some days you got to look really hard. Sure. But when you actually look at what happened, all of the wah-wah crybabying you're hearing, from our elected officials, and we're going to look at this, and this is really a terrible thing, and all this other kind of stuff, you have to look at how the Army made this decision. And they made the decision in a manner that is not what Connecticut state-run news will tell you. And let's back up a little bit. Let's go way back. Let's go back 30 years when Dick Cheney was Secretary of Defense. And he was going around and he was saying, we have to do new means of defense in this country. We have to be more efficient. It's not going to be just, C-swing hit and the contract's going to come to you. You got to be leaner. You got to be meaner. Now, of course, he was involved in that himself. That's another story for another time. But it was like the light should have gone on. And in Connecticut, it did not. What does Connecticut do? Connecticut just throws the bribe. They throw the DECD bribe. Everybody goes dancing on the helipad, and everything is wonderful. And, the government or people in the government, I'm thankful we still have good people in the government, even though I'm sorry for Connecticut and what's going on, but who look at this and say, it's a lot more than that, and the light never went on here. We had two choices at that point, going back years. Don't even look at Ned. Go back before Ned to either say, okay, we're going to compete, we're going to make this better, or we're going to go do something else because we can't possibly do it. It's one or the other, and when you look at the trade papers and when you look at what's there, and if you look at Dick Cheney and just this whole thing coming forward, you can't just throw one bribe on top of another bribe and say this is going to work. I went to, because I always look outside of what I'm seeing there. When you look at, there's a good publication here called National Defense. It's things you won't read in the Connecticut press. When asked what put the tilter rotor ahead of the competition, General Barry declined to elaborate. We're not going to talk specifics about the evaluation, but what we're seeking is a best value comprehensive approach. Now, what's in that best value comprehensive approach? Is it rolling blackouts? Is it truck taxes? Is it, the fact that Texas has better synergies than we do? And then if you go to popular mechanics, this is not a political publication. This is a publication for nerds of mechanical things, of which I am not, but I can very easily understand what they're saying. The V-280 Valor is much more capable, faster, twice as fast, can carry 11 more troops, can do more things on a battlefield. And it's like, where they're all sitting there crying and screaming, and it's like, I'm thankful we still have business-like people in our government who will protect our troops, because it's a lot more than just DECD bribes and Connecticut's wonderful. We're not. We don't even have an energy policy, for crying out loud. And, this is where I get very, very concerned.
Tony D'Angelo joins me each and every Tuesday. Tony D'Angelo 7 is where you follow him on Twitter. Where were you between 5:30 and 7:30 yesterday?
Between 5:30 and 7:30, I was between the barn and the house. I'd come in and I had dinner. Yeah. And as I was watching dinner, I saw that Mr. Bankman-Fried, there are authorities in the Bahamas who finally took him into custody, and I was marveling at that, thinking that was yet another thing that our wonderful state is involved in its economic development of the fantastic world of cryptocurrency. And the first thing I thought of is his little girlfriend, Miss Ellison, is singing a tune, and it'll be very interesting as to what comes out. I was kind of keeping my mind on this and that at the same time. That's where I was.
Okay, no, I was curious because Governor Lamont I figured he'd invited you. He invited me to the First Lady and Governor Lamont's holiday party for media personnel. So you didn't get invited to that.
Nah, it's okay. I'll live through it.
All right.